Great. Welcome to another fabulous Data Champions online discussion. Today we're going to be featuring Steve talking about grant-making analysis. But before we get started, I would love to just do a quick roll call and get people to both give us an update on your current data challenges, priorities, and also while you're doing that, fill that in on the Google Doc. Which I will quickly cut and paste. But if I could get Kate, Kate, have you made your order?
I have made my order, yes.
Very good.
I've sent them to bring me salad.
You have already put stuff into the Google Doc. Can I get you to start off on what
yes,
you're doing?
Finally trying to get around to learning how to use AI. Inspired by Hannah, actually, to spend some time on it, because I looked at it some time ago and then have just never found any time to work on it. And having had a little play around with it yesterday, I think it looks as if it'll be something very, very useful in terms of looking at how our donors' interests overlap and can we use that to align them a little better. Cool.
And I'm curious too, Kate, I know this is a big ask in your journey, but in using it, but it would be super helpful if you did keep track of the things that really help you understand how to use it.
Okay, well, I am really right at the beginning, so
yeah, which is why I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's quite overwhelming, actually. And I started looking at some of the tutorials and things online, and then thought, no, this just looks too complicated. I'm just going to go and poke it and play with it. So that's all I've done so far, really. But some of the mapping is really good, and so it'll be interesting to learn how to use it a little more effectively. So
great.
If I could just quickly come in there, because I'm also probably in the same boat as you, Kate. I've looked at it, can sort of get data into it, and then just can't figure out how to manipulate it. So if anyone has got an easy example, just producing a map, I would love to see that and maybe shared in another one of these webinars, just to, because a success just breeds success with these things. Once you figure out how to do one thing, you can.
I can help with that, perhaps, because we've been using it a bit for our grants committee. So sort of a mapping tool, but also isolating particular areas that the grants committee might be interested in. So doing filters and that sort of thing. But I don't know how well it would work with me showing it via Zoom, but I'd be really happy to do a session on that with people. I'm not an expert, but I am using it more often every round, so hopefully
that would be great. Yeah, because I mean, actually, we're not necessarily sure that we want an expert. We want somebody that's working, using it as we want to use it, and is encountering the same issues. I was really thrilled to discover that you can just bring reports straight in from Salesforce without having to export them into Excel and what have you. So already it's quite exciting.
Yeah.
Great. So actually, I doubt we will get another call in before April 5th. But I am happy to bookmark that as like a call we can do after April 5th and just sort of have Skillshare on using Power BI. Is that how you say it?
I always say Power BI. I don't know.
I've always said Power BI, but I don't know why.
I think it's business intelligence, isn't it? So it's 2 words.
Okay.
Is that an oxymoron? Sorry. Moving right along. Let me see. Andrew. Andrew, wait, I had put you on mute. Let me unmute you. Andrew, how are you? And what are your current priorities and challenges and what you're working on?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned the last time I took part in one of these, it's a bit of a back to basics exercise with us with our digits database, which obviously should sit at the middle of a lot of what we do. And I think that's true of a lot of community foundations. And it's just actually going back and just looking at how we're using that and just cleaning up the data that we do hold, both in terms of grant making and development, which is, I think from doing these sessions, I kind of got to a point where I was maybe getting ahead of myself and using some different tools, whereas actually we needed to go back a little bit and look at digits again.
Great, cool. Anybody got any sort of wisdom on digits?
Hi there.
to share.
I hope I haven't caught you at a bad time. I had a
No,
quick...
I am actually putting you on mute.
Yeah, I'm going to say someone's talking in the background.
Yeah, I have powers. I can see who's being noisy. It's okay. I just put you on mute for a minute, but don't worry, unless you have something to say. Great. That sounded good, Andy. Hannah, what's your current priorities and updates from Sussex Community Foundation?
Just a brief recruitment update. So we have found a Tom replacement, but sadly not somebody with the digital know-how that I was looking for. So it's still going to be very much part of the job description, but I've agreed with people here that I'm going to kind of carry on leading the digital work until that person is trained and confident in that area. Because, it was a bit of a stretch perhaps to put that in the advert and expect somebody to come through with all the kind of range of experience in grant making that we were looking for, as well as that. So, but it's great. We've got somebody coming on board. Yesterday I had a really good session with, it was a training workshop that was set up by ACF with CAS, do you know, the Centre for Accelerated Technology, I think. So we all sort of got together and we kind of went through and looked at kind of what digital problems we might want to solve. So there were various trusts participating in that. And it was really good. Came out with lots of ideas and thoughts about how to bring in digital expertise on our board and our grants committee. So we sort of did a lot of sort of discussion, groundbreaking, to be honest, but just actually there are some simple things to do to find a way forward, get better representation in that area. As an organisation, so that was good. So there'll be some sort of follow-up sessions, I think, that ACF might be organising. So I'd be happy to organise some sharing around that when it comes through. And then, sort of coming up next, we'll be looking at the last year of grants data for the organisation, because I've committed myself to producing a series of kind of impact reports, which we haven't done previously. So I'll be looking at the sort of broad range of applications that we've supported through the year, kind of categorising them a bit better than we've done previously, bringing in information from tools like 360 Giving, and then also looking at some of our monitoring data as well, because we don't currently do very much in terms of reporting that to the board and trustees. So I'm hoping, obviously, with Tom not here, there's a bit of a gap in our resources, but I'm hoping that we can produce something that we can then just reproduce every year. So I've been setting up some dashboards to bring in set reports that we can then just filter, which will hopefully make it a bit more automated. But that's kind of my next sort of area of work that I'll be looking at around data and digital.
Can I ask, is that Salesforce dashboards?
Yes.
The 360 dashboard?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to use a bit around 360, but I think all the data that 360 provides is on our system anyway. But some of the areas around kind of organisation size is something that we're looking at using a bit more. I don't know how possible it is, but one of the things that we're interested in is how far some of the organisations we've supported have grown and developed over time with our support. And obviously it's very difficult to our small grants who contributing to that hugely, but it is a measure that I'd like us to start looking at.
Hannah, can I just ask one quick? You said you did some work with Cast.
Yes.
Was that one of their design hops?
Yeah, it was a design hop. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. No,
yeah.
I'm going to one next week, so it's good.
Oh, are you?
Positive time. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. No, it was really good. It was very fast. It was sort of a bit challenging for some people, but I quite enjoyed it. I like that approach.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
On a side note, can I also ask a question, Hannah? You said it was run by ACF. Have you taken up the membership of
We
that?
have, yes, yeah. So in fact, I've booked myself into quite a few different things in the next few months. But yeah, we are members now.
Okay, so I'm quite keen to do that. And now they've got this discounted membership, I'd be interested to
yeah, they do tend to be quite good sessions and quite varied. So I think it's worthwhile for us at the moment.
So that's a bit off topic, but thank you.
Cool. Let me just give my quick updates. I'm actually running an online discussion later today. We have close to 90 people have RSVP'd from around the world to talk about building a data culture, which I am quite excited about because that's also what I am trying to plan right now for our April 5th meeting. So hoping to get a lot of stuff this afternoon. It looks like I'm also going to be designing an Open Government and Data Day for the Open Government Summit in Ottawa at the end of May, and I'm just starting to do work on that, so I'm super excited. And also, of course, as I meant, the aforementioned creating the agenda for April 5th, which, just to say quickly, I'm hoping to circulate a draft agenda to you all on Monday and get any inputs from you before Friday if there's any concern, comments, or whatever. And then, of course, we'll be ready to roll on Friday. Well, I'll do just a little bit more on that before we end the call. More, since you are here, just do you want to give a quick update, say hello or anything, now that you've got your headphones?
Hi, everyone. Now that I got my headphones. We don't have any, we basically just starting a new strategy, which we'll share with anyone who wants to. Yeah, so we're doing some stuff, and I'm actually wrapping up some stuff that we've done in East Sussex, so it will be interesting to Hannah, all kinds of stuff that we've done with their data and other data and council data. So I'm just in the midst of doing some analysis and see if the results are the same, and then I can send something hopefully next week. So that also will be used hopefully with Essex Community Foundation. So yeah, that's what we're doing this week.
Great.
Great.
Oh, and the 360 Giving is now an official government standard. So if any of your councils don't want to publish in 360 Giving, you can tell them it's a government standard now. So they should comply with it as well, which is good. Yeah, that's it.
Great. Great. Steve, let me let you take over and tell us about GrantMaking Analysis at the Essex Community Foundation.
Or the lack of it, yeah. Okay, I'm going to try and share as much as I can on screen, but I may well end up tying myself up in knots. But anyway, let's see what you can see. Okay, so you should have a picture of a map. So we've always, I'm sure, like you, produced GrantMaking Analysis. This is a page from our annual review that you can see on screen at the moment. It's very pretty, very graphic, not hugely informative. And it tended to raise more questions than it answered. So, people would say, that's nice, but why do you spend so little in Rochford, for example, and so much in Braintree? And then you get into discussions over, well, as an organisation working for its fund holders, if all our fund holders are in Braintree, that's where the money goes. So it didn't tend to be hugely useful information, but it was something we could get access to. We also, so I have to figure out how I change screens. Hold on, bear with. No, I've lost it. Oh, there we go. So that's really embarrassing pauses. We also produce stuff like this for our trustees. Hopefully you can see a lot of pie charts. Again, it's very retrospective. Tells us what we did, but doesn't really help us much with figuring out what we should be doing, how we can change things, because these are categorized in vital signs categories, and we can only use one category for each grant effectively, and we respond to the applications we receive in line with what our donors actually want us to fund. So the sort of breakthrough came, and I'm glad that Moores is now on the call, because a bit of a breakthrough came when we started publishing our data to 360 Giving. Because once they loaded it into Insights, hoping you can now see our 360 Giving Insights page, obviously we've got a completely different interpretation of our figures. The same data that we've always been using, but a different way of looking at it. And it was all very fine and dandy until we got to the bit that said about the age and the income of the recipients that we have. And there was quite a kerfuffle in the office at that point about, well, no, we only fund small organisations. We don't fund these large charities that have been going for years and have significant incomes up to 100, up to 1 million, etc. And we said, well, that's what the data says. If the data says it, and that's the data we've provided, that's what people are going to see. And now we accept this information does exclude non-registered charities, so that helped to temper the discussion a bit, but did cause me to think, well, actually we need to look at this more carefully, because actually we've been saying something for years, but now we may need to prove it, and that's really where the data side of it started to come in. So I'm going to try one more screen share, I think, which will be this document. Okay, so you should now be able to see a Excel spreadsheet. And what I then tried to do was look at the ages of organisations and compare them to what 360 Giving was showing as well. And actually, although that graph, the bar chart is in a mirror image, it actually does show something very similar to 360 Giving. So by inadvertently putting our data somewhere and we hadn't really thought about how to analyze it, we actually found it was telling us something we were quite unaware of. So what we now need to do is start analysing our grant making in a different way, we've decided. Try to get it to help us make decisions about our grant making. What questions do we need to be asking? Is it things like, what are we not funding? What are the types of organisations that we are completely unable to fund? Not anecdotally, we know that, some of that off the top of our heads, but can we actually prove that with the data? And then using that information to drive discussion at our grants and programs committee, because just telling them we're spending huge amounts of money on learning or healthy living or whatever isn't telling them enough. It's telling them what we are not achieving or not making a difference to, and then seeing how we then use that information to motivate our donors, with the understanding that if it's not in their area and they're not interested, we're not necessarily going to convince everybody. So the questions that's raising is, do we have the data at the moment? Is it something we already have somewhere in Salesforce and we just need to be getting better at analysing it, or do we actually need to start capturing it? The way we're going to work on that is to just pick 3, maybe 5 questions that we want to answer, and then figure out how we're going to answer those questions. And actually just coming up with the questions is a tricky thing, but once we've got that from the grants team, we'll start looking at the analysis. We'll then work with our board to say, this is what we can present thus far. We hope it generates discussion. What would you like to know? But we're going to need to manage their expectations, because coming back to, if we haven't got the data, we can't present it to them. Some of the real tricks I think that we are going to, or obstacles we're going to hit, is that to find out what you are not doing is quite difficult to prove with a database. It's easy to prove what you have done because data is data, but the lack of data is quite hard to extract. But I think properly worded and properly thought out, I think we can probably get away with that. And some of the key things for me are that we have to do this almost on a one-touch basis. So we've been talking about dashboards there. I do not want to see this organisation spending a month at the end of its financial year extracting data, pivot tabling it, tweaking it, taking out all the little bits and pieces it didn't want in there in the first place to then produce a pie chart that nobody looks at. I want to have some things that we can just refresh on a weekly, monthly, annual basis, and just get access to the data that we're looking at, and then think, oh, what questions does that provoke? So we need to get much more dashboard orientated. And why I'm so interested in Power BI is that it seems that, once you've created the queries, the data can be just simply refreshed and repopulated into web spaces. So we can actually bring that to committee meetings. So although the data itself is complex, I want the display and the interrogation of it to be as easy as possible. And finally, the first obstacle to that I've come across, just as a point, was trying to find out the age of an organisation. For some reason, the year that the organisation was set up in Salesforce is a text field, so you can't do any analysis on that number as to how old it is. So that was my first spanner in my works. I cannot analyse that data in Salesforce, but some of the things I have been able to do in there, I'm not going to try and share that on screen. It probably won't work. I think that's it from now on. If you want to ask many questions, go for it. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Steve, did you mention the...
Keep moving about.
Yeah, just rotating my phone on. I was sitting in the side room with my phone because it's too noisy in the office. The 360 data is only showing those organisations which are registered charities. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Something you talked about at the event recently, Moores.
The point about that was my get out of jail card when we were discussing it within the team. I said, okay, because everyone got quite heated about this. We definitely fund smaller organisations. Okay, that was my excuse. But actually, when I've gone back and analysed it with the data from Salesforce, which is just our raw data, it still displays quite similar information. So what I'm getting at is that we have been saying something for a number of years that the data does not prove. And that suddenly made us wake up and think, actually, we need to be a lot closer to what our data will tell us than just peddling a story that we can't prove. So I think we did that the last call, didn't we? Said the stories are great and really meaningful, but actually, if you go back to the data and it doesn't back up the story, you're suddenly in a tricky position.
Makes me want to run off and run that report on my grants data.
Yeah, because it just, and then of course you could say, well, okay, if we're comfortable with that and these are the right organisations we're funding, end of discussion. But actually, if we say we only fund really small, young organisations, then we've got to be able to prove that. And I think what it actually shows us is just, at the top level, is actually we're quite risk averse. We're not keen to fund very young organisations because we say, well, you need to have a bit of a history, some accounts behind you. But that's not actually what we say, but that's what we're doing. So it'll challenge our board, which is a good thing.
Do you know, Steve, what proportion of your grantees are in the uncategorised category, if you like?
I just looked at Insights, if it will help, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's shown on there. I think we only had sort of like about 100 or so that weren't.
190 out of 579. So that was, I just did it for you because I was interested. So it's basically 31% are on registered groups, but also 31% are having more than $1 million turnover. So that's the thing. So it's like basically a third are actually very small, but also a third are very big. So I think this is what's really interesting about this.
Yeah. So what it's done is just challenged us, because as soon as you can just throw a very simple bar chart up on a screen in front of everybody, suddenly everyone's engaged with the question. And even by going back to our raw data, we've still shown that 360 giving is not far off the mark as a pattern. It's correct. So yeah, I'm
not suggesting that this is a route to go, but we've actually got an income threshold for our grant making most programs apart from a couple, so that organisations have to have under $1 million income. But I mean, we struggle with that a little bit because it does sort of miss out some key kind of service areas. And depending on the type of program we're running, you know, there are definitely some large organisations like hospices, for example, with one of our programs that just can't get our funding, but you know, they're the only provider in that particular work area. So,
yeah, and it's quite likely. I mean, we do quite a lot of designated donations where the donor will say to us, you know, I want you to allocate some of my grant making to these charities, and most of those will be national charities, and they will skew the numbers. But if that's what we do, if that's the service that we provide, then we mustn't shy away from it when it turns up in our data. But just be aware of it and how we're going to explain it to people. But the fact that we certainly don't seem to be able to evidence that we're funding a lot of very grassroots organisations, very young, is a challenge. I'm not saying that, again, that we might be perfectly comfortable with it, but we didn't really know it until we looked at the data. So it was very insightful for us, and we're going to do a lot more work on this now to see what is it we think we're doing, but we can't prove we're doing, or vice versa. What can we prove we're doing that actually we'd rather we weren't doing?
Sorry. Go finish, Hannah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we struggle with some untested assumptions around. So our grants committee, the trustees particularly wanted to support those groups that haven't applied to us before. And I think there's really good, clear logic around that, because obviously we want to spread our funds as widely as possible and reach new areas. But at the same time, that assumption isn't kind of necessarily well researched. So, you know, if we're prioritising those newer groups and we're not really looking at the beneficiaries and the impact of that work, then it's quite it's a basic way of prioritising our funding. I always think. But yeah, it's really interesting, because once people know that the data's there, then you can sort of pick out some particular things that you want to prioritise, but there's no necessary meaning behind that.
No.
Cool. My question was actually going to be like, why do you think you thought you were funding small organizations when you weren't?
Because that's what we've always said we do.
It's kind of the culture of the community foundation that we're about small, isn't it?
Yeah. And anecdotes, you know, based on what we talk about and what is in people's heads, it does happen. But I think what this has shown us is that the data doesn't back it up. That may be because this is why you have to drill into it. Maybe we award larger grants to larger organisations tackling bigger issues across a wider area. Maybe that's skewing the information. Maybe we have just become risk averse. Maybe we are not reaching those organisations that do not yet have access to the networks that would tell them about us as a funder. But we have been, what this just showed us was that maybe we have been assuming that we're doing something that we do. We're not doing it as much as we thought we were.
Well, I wonder too if this is also a bit where there's an opportunity to do this harmonization between qualitative and quantitative. Because I do what my assumption actually in listening to you talk is that probably your foundation maybe is giving like more time to the smaller organizations, and so your day-to-day is probably a lot more like, if you have to support, those are the ones that do need the more support. They ask more questions, you're probably having more interaction, right? Maybe that's what it is. But I do wonder if that sort of balance, and also that bit, like, just looking at these numbers, what they're just telling you is the money that's going out the door, right? But what they're not telling you is like how much time people are actually spending with each one of these organizations, or you know what I mean? Like there's different things that that the foundation is obviously doing, and sharing knowledge and all that. And those numbers actually don't indicate that, right?
No, I don't. We're not guilt tripping ourselves about what we are and what we're not doing. It's just it just really provoked a discussion in the office, and we just found it a different. So we've been very retrospective in what we're analysing, and just sort of churning out easy data. Quite honestly, how much have we awarded, who to, whatever. And this has made us think. Actually, we need to be thinking a bit more about what we're doing with our money, and making more decisions based on the data that we have and that's coming in from other environments, which is a good thing, because actually often we struggle with how do you steer your where you're heading as you get bigger. You need to, we will start funding much larger projects, but also we don't want to lose touch with the small organizations that we've always said and maintained that we must continue to support. So we're hoping that the data will help us guide some of that.
Yeah. No, that sounds, it's this thing too that, we've talked about in terms of like, it's answered a question for you, but now you're having all these other questions come up as a result of that question getting answered.
Yeah. And I think that's the good thing, is that actually we've often struggled to come up with really good questions. So actually now the data is making us ask questions that we hadn't thought of, which is a positive. I'm not remotely sort of bothered or upset by what we found here. I'm actually really pleased that it's starting to make us think of more challenges for ourselves to work differently.
Yeah, and how you think about yourselves, right? And then also this bit about understanding the reality, but it's also just noting that the numbers for the amounts of money that are going out is a slice of the reality, but not the whole picture.
Oh yeah,
right.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Other questions for folks? Going once, going twice. So Steve, did you have any other bits?
No, the only other thing is I put on my the Google Doc thing was I've just started to analyze the survey results from the Salesforce survey, which it's data orientated, but not to, it's just, I think I'm bitten off more than I can chew there. So if anyone's really good at analyzing survey output, I'll be interested to hear from them, just because of the way the data tends to come out. But I'll get there. I'm going to have to break it down into lots of different small segments where I can analyze them individually, I think.
It's really hard doing those surveys. It's not until you actually run them that you suddenly think, we should ask this in a different way. And I think I filled mine out. I noticed one question where it asked what other tools you used, and you could only select one.
Yeah, I spotted that. Unfortunately, you can't change it after you've sent the bloody thing out. It's not a perfect science, but it's a good start, and the stuff that's coming in is quite interesting. I mean, SurveyMonkey does provide an awful lot of graphical output, and I think I'm probably going to have to run with a lot of that, because it's actually clearer than anything I could conjure up with a pivot table. But
have you picked up, Steve, that you can do quite a lot of in detail filtering with that as well?
No, I haven't really. I've just been keeping tabs on how many people are filling it out, and then thinking I've basically got about a week to analyse it before we are meeting to discuss it. So I'm just trying to get my head around what I need to do. Some of it is you're just almost looking at coloured bars and just go, well, clearly everyone is at that end of the bar. That's good, but when you want to get into more subtleties.
Well, one thing we found when we did our grant making survey, you may know this already, but I hadn't realised till I started to look at the SurveyMonkey functions in a bit more detail that you can. There are a group of people that were a little negative about our grant making, small number, but I found that I could isolate sets of answers so that I could find, for example, the proportion of people that were negative about our grant making, percentage of those hadn't actually had a grant from us before. Sort of do some quite good filtering to give you a sense of what the background is to people. I mean, it doesn't quite work for your survey, but yeah, there's lots of functionality around that was quite helpful for me anyway.
Okay, I'll have a detailed look at that. The only other thing we're doing, which is a really quite tenuous link, is we are looking to move our data into SharePoint, and that's data on everything we've got basically. So just starting to plan out how we do that without making a huge hash of it, because I've heard if it goes wrong, it tends to go wrong big. But anyway,
what are you on? Do you have a local server at the minute, or what?
Yeah, we're on a local server. We've been on that sort of thing for years, but when we moved to the latest version, we lost a lot of our remote access functionality, which I could put back, but I think the cloud is where we have to go, because otherwise we'll just be taken there by default. But the few people I've spoken to about SharePoint say, you really got to make sure you don't get it wrong, and that you accept it's got an administrative overhead. So we're just trying to figure out how we can structure it here, but also bring some added value to it. So it's not just files and folders, but remotely accessible. There's a lot more interactive functionality, sharing information with trustees, but making sure the security levels are set up correctly so the trustees can see what we want them to, but we don't want them editing things that are, we're working on. So
to be encouraging, we're on SharePoint, and I think it works very well.
Okay, I will be in my car and on my way down to you.
Yeah, I didn't say I know how it works. I just say it does work.
No, I think we're going to have a few road trips planned this year to just find anyone who says you're having remote success with anything. We'll be planning a visit. That's that's good to know. Okay, I may well.
Same here as well, actually.
Okay, that's because it's quite hard to find people that are prepared to put their hand up and say, we got it working. Okay, that's good.
It's a bit slower because it's the cloud. So I think when you're uploading changes to documents remote, it's a bit of a pain, but generally I think it works quite well.
Good.
Yeah, it's something that is about how you get it set up on an individual desktop, and getting advice to be consistent across all the users as well. But now when I'm working at home, when I'm working in the office, I'm looking at exactly the same thing. And it works exactly the same way, which is great. It didn't, and it took a little bit of tweaking to get it to that point in terms of attaching documents and things. But when it works really well.
Okay, cool. I'll be in touch.
I just have to, is there any, on the responsible data front with that and moving it to SharePoint? I mean, I know that you've noted appropriate security levels and all that sort of stuff. And just, just wondering how big of a concern that is.
Well, with the thing that we had before, which this really has to be Charterhouse rules, is that we used to just email stuff out to trustees, and you thought, although we don't tend to send out anything that's confidential or has personal information in it to do with grant applications, email is insecure. So we said, okay, the first thing we'll do is create a SharePoint site that trustees can access so that we can share important documentation, which is grant approvals, board papers. And there's a surprising amount of resistance just to that. But the point is they have to log in. So before, with an email, their partner could access it, someone else could get access to their email. We now have at least a login point so we know we're getting it to the right person. But what we then have to be able to do is segregate the data within there for our own staff, let alone for trustees, and just say, we've all signed a confidentiality agreement, but we do not want trustees poking around in, events, invites and stuff like that. They just need access to what they need access to. But at a high level, we want to be able to share things with them, news stories, good photos, tweets, whatever it is. And SharePoint does seem to be able to create this kind of intranet environment where you can segregate data out, but also share key things. So it's going to be I think it will engage both the staff and trustees more if we get it right.
Cool. Just noting you had said Chatham House rules. Do you want me to, when I do the
Oh,
report, do you want me to edit that out?
No, don't be, no. I'm just saying I mean, I'm sure people must have sent stuff out by email before GDPR.
Yeah.
It's just, it's interesting how people still, even after all that GDPR stuff that went right through the board, they still go, "Oh, can you just email me that?" No, because I can't guarantee it will land. I know you can still download a file from SharePoint and then, your PC can be hacked, but it's an extra layer of security. So it's an education process for trustees for sure.
Yeah. And actually I think that, and it's an interesting part in also building the data culture too, of having I think it's having the ability to just do that pushback, right, for your trustees and say, yeah, actually we're not going to email it to you. Here's how you can get a hold of it, but we do really want you to look at it.
Yeah.
Right. And we're not trying to put up barriers. We're just trying to be responsible to our grantees and everyone else.
Yeah. We need to get it to a point where logging into view information is the default way to do things, with automated processes that say, please be advised a new document has been posted to this area. Click here to read it. They'll be taken through a login page. And that's how they will interact with us much more frequently rather than just coming in on a quarterly basis to look at board papers. Yeah.
Can I ask, is there a cost implication to having logins for your trustees? Because that's been something we've sort of wondered about.
No, because when I set us up on Office 365, any member of staff and a volunteer has got, I can't remember what it is. Is it an E3 license? Costs about £2.50 a month. You get the desktop software.
What was that called again?
I think it's an E3 license.
Right.
It's a couple of pounds per month for staff. But Microsoft also give completely free licenses that allow you to access Office 365 cloud only. So they get everything, but they don't get the desktop software. So they can't download Word, Excel, etc. to their PC, but they can view them in the cloud. And that's free. So we got 50 of those licenses when we set it up. What I'm actually thinking about, and this is some way down the line, is whether or not we would actually issue those licenses to panel members and then come up with SharePoint sites where grants panel members could meet, discuss, vote, and we would have access to the data that they were generating out of that, because those license costs us nothing. So the only overhead then would be setting people up and taking them back down again. But again, there's a security concern, so it's a way off, but trustees are a good guinea pig.
Yep. Great. Any other questions before I do our little wrap up? Okay. Well, great. This has been an excellent deep dive. Steve, thanks so much for sharing your journey on the grant making analysis. And it's really heartening to see the questions that have been raised just by looking at, where your grant making money is going, by looking at the numbers.
And it was super useful for me. Thank you.
Jenna, I'm pleased you're here, because it's one of those things you look at it and go, oh, that's nice, and then suddenly it challenged us, so it's good.
Yeah, and to the core, that's quite interesting. Your internal story of yourselves, right, and how that might differ. I think that's really fascinating. So we'll want to get into that more. So I think we're seeing each and every one of you on April 5th.
I can only be there for the afternoon.
Okay.
I know it won't be the same, but, hey.
Well, yes. Well, no. Yeah, we're going to have a great time without you. The morning's going to totally rock. So, your loss. No. But Kate, just to be clear, because I know, sorry, Andrew, you got to leave around 4. But I was hoping maybe we could do some one-on-ones and stuff until 5. Are you there till 5, Kate?
I don't think I've got any limitation at the end of the day. It's just I've got a meeting in the morning that I can't get out of.
Great. Sorry, now I've got you committed. But anyways, you will see my grand plan in the draft agenda. Kate, what time will you get there?
Oh, now you're asking. I think the meeting that I've got in the morning runs up till 11:30, and then obviously I've got to get up to London, so a bit after that.
Okay. There you go. No, I respect that. It's about train, and we will be ready for you when you come, whenever that is. But that's super helpful. Excuse me. So the thing I wanted to raise, so we're having the face-to-face on April 5th. After April 5th, what I'm hoping to do, so so far we have done Sussex Community Foundation, Devon Community Fund, Essex Community Foundation. Boy, I'm slaughtering these names. But we've gotten, so 1, 2, 3, am I right? We've got 3 Data Champions calls. I'd actually love for Kate, Andrew, and Adam to each do a call. So I think in terms of the plan for the Data Champions things, like we'd love to do that. Kate, like if we want to do yours as part of the like your journey with Power BI or Power BI and doing the like, you know, how that is impacted and all that would be excellent. But what I'm getting at is like we will do the 3 calls, and then that will probably be the end of the official sort of Data Champion stuff. That said, what we then will be doing, I will be talking with each of you about what you've gotten out of it. We will then we want to do an evaluation of it and figure out like what's the best recommendations for UKCF and 360 Giving for continuing this kind of engagement around data with various different people. And I think like one of the things I wanted to say to you, Hannah, something I think is really critical for, you know, you have a person that will need to up their digital and data skills, right? Is there a way, like I'm thinking a champions network is going to be something that would still be critical for Sussex Community Foundation in doing that sort of upskilling for people that are, you know, and I think the one thing that I've learned from all of you is that you've learning on the job, right? And so how can we be thinking in terms of how does the network help people build their skills and all that, because it's certainly on the job. So anyway, something to just sort of put in your hat and think about. We'll be circling back, and I'll certainly be talking more about all this, but that is kind of the grand plan. More, is there anything I missed in that rundown? Oh, you were just biting something. She's got, yeah, good. Sorry. And so I can thankfully give you all an extra 10 minutes now to your day. And just to say thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing you all on April 5th.
You too.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.